Now the DJS-1000 gets a bit of stick for only being able to sequence 4 bars at a time, which if you're playing at 125 BPM for example, is about 7.5 seconds. Now 7.5 seconds isn't a large amount of time, especially if you want to do some large riser effects for example. Most main breakdowns are about 30 seconds, so you can't really do something of that length. But actually there is a feature built into every single pad which I really think can help with this, and it can help create some amazing big effects and evolving synth lines. So I've been thinking about this a bit recently because I like to perform my tracks out live. I take my stems from Ableton and load them into the DJS-1000. In fact, I've done a video on this and I'll link to it out there. But recently I did a remix for DJ Dove of his track I Feel Chemistry, and in that I've got this kind of evolving synth line. And in fact it evolves over about 30 seconds, so actually cropping it to 7.5 seconds just wouldn't have the same kind of effect. So I started looking into different ways that I could achieve the same kind of thing that I would do in my DAW, but on the DJS-1000. And the key to it all was the LFO. There's actually an LFO on every single pad within the DJS-1000, which you can map to any single parameter on that pad. And it really does allow for so many possibilities that you can create these huge, massive live effects and ever-evolving synth lines. So that's what I want to cover today. I want to show you how you can use the LFO to create some amazing big effects and evolving synth lines. So let's create a brand new project. I'll go to Project, Create New, and OK. Now, usually, obviously, I would load in all my samples, my beats and things like that. But today, I just want to concentrate on the effects side. So let's go to the first cell within here, click Browse, and this is where we're going to load in a sample within here. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go down to a folder called Waveforms. Now, you don't need any amazing samples to do this kind of effect. You can do it on just about any sample you want to, but I've just wanted to show you how it works on just some really simple waveforms. So I've got a few different ones within here. I've got a saw wave. That's at C3. Then I've also got a saw wave at C4. Then I've got a couple of sine waves. And then I've also got some square waves. And then finally some white noise. And I've picked just these really simple waveforms just to show you how amazing the LFO is and how you can create some amazing effects just using those basic waveforms. Now, if you want to get those waveforms, I'll put a link in the description below if you want to download them. So let's go ahead and load in one of those saw ones. So that saw wave is now on the pad. Now there's really two ways that you can play this. You can either play it with one shot, which means you just hit it once and it will just keep playing, or you can put it into gate mode, which means it only plays when you hold it down. Now it's up to you which way you want to do it. To be honest, I like it with the one shot method because then I can just hit it and I can use my hands to do other things on the unit. So that's what I'm going to set it as for now. Now, the next setting I want to turn on is loop because I want to make sure that this keeps playing until I tell it to stop. Now, with these samples that I've already prepared, I've made sure that these loop indefinitely, so you don't actually hear it when it kind of loops back round again. So whichever sample you're using, make sure that it loops nicely. So I've now got that set up. Next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to go into the pad and we're actually going to go into the LFO. Now this might look a little bit confusing, a little bit scary at first, but actually is quite simple. You've got the destination up here. This tells you what the LFO is actually going to affect. You have the shape there, which you can play around with to get the effect that you want to. To be honest, the sine wave works really nicely for most evolving pads and effects, but you can play around and see what kind of effect you can get out of it. Then you also have the speed and the depth. We'll come on to them in a little bit and you'll see how you can control it to make it interesting. So the first thing I'm actually going to do is I'm going to set the destination as pitch. So what the LFO is going to do is it's going to modulate up and down and affect the pitch. So I'm going to select that. And now if we hit this, we'll hear the effect. Now, because I've got it in one-shot mode, I hold down Shift and press the pad, and that'll actually stop it playing. Now, as you can hear there, it's actually going up and down. The pitch is going up and down with the LFO, and it does sound quite cool, but we can actually affect it even more by changing the speed control and the depth control. So as you can hear there, the speed control controls how fast that goes up and down, and then the depth control is how much it goes up and down. So you can actually make it quite subtle by taking the speed down and the depth down, or you can pump them both up and get a more kind of exaggerated kind of effect. Now, obviously, we have those speed and depth controls within there. And if I go back to the home screen, you'll see that they no longer appear within there. We actually have to go into the pad and make sure the LFO is selected to then have those controls to then play around with it. So if you're using it in the middle of a set, for example, you need to make sure that obviously that's highlighted to then be able to control the speed and depth of that LFO. Now, this can be a bit of a pain to have to go into every pad and select the LFO to then be able to affect it, especially if you're in the middle of a performance and you want to see what else is going on. You want to be on that home screen to see what other samples are playing, for example. But you don't actually have to go into that screen to control the LFO. You can actually set the LFO to be controlled on the ribbon controller on the left-hand side. So let's start off by going back to the home screen, and we want to make sure that the ribbon control on the left-hand side is set to user 1 or user 2. I usually set up user 1, but you can set up both to be whatever you want it to be. So I'm actually going to hold down the home button, which actually accesses the utility button, and we can see here that we have the touch strip settings for user 1 and user 2. Now, this is set per project. So when you're setting up your project, make sure that you set this up if you want to be able to use it. So I'm going to click into this, and we can see here that we have a whole list of parameters here that we can set up. So the first parameter within here, I'm going to click on this. I'm actually going to scroll down. You can see there's so much stuff that you can control with the ribbon controller. I'm going to scroll all the way, almost way down to the bottom, until we get to the LFO section. Now you can see within here we can control the speed and the depth. So I'm going to set up the speed first of all, and then I'm going to go down and then also set up the depth as well. Now it's totally up to you whether you want to do one or the other or both of them. I tend to do both because you can get some really interesting effects using that ribbon controller. So we now have those two parameters in there for the LFO speed and the depth, but we can go further and we can start customizing this because we actually have a bottom value and a top value. Now this relates to the ribbon control on the left-hand side here. So we have the bottom value down the bottom and then the top value up the top, as you might have thought. So what we can do is we can actually start customizing this, and we can customize this for every single control. So for example, with the depth, when we're at the bottom of the ribbon controller, it says at the moment it's -64. Now I don't really want that to be the case. I actually want it to be 0. So I actually want it to be no effect. So I'm actually going to increase this to 0. So when I'm at the bottom of the ribbon, it's at 0, and at the top, it's at 63. So there's not going to be any effect. There's not going to be any depth at all. It's pretty much going to sound just like the normal pad at the bottom. But when we get up to the top, it's going to be the most amount of depth. Next up, let's have a look at the speed control. And as we can see here, the bottom value is 0 and the top value is 127. Now with the LFO speed, it's a bit different because the speed is the opposite way around that you might think. So the smaller the value, the quicker it is, and then the larger value, the slower it is. So we actually kind of want to switch these around because when you think about it, the quickest is going to be at the bottom and then the slowest is going to be at the top. So we might not want that. It's up to you. You might want that, you might not. But for me, I want to swap these two around. So actually I'm going to increase this all the way up to the top and then decrease this all the way to the bottom. So let's try this and see how it works. So as you can hear there, the ribbon controller only takes effect when you've got the ribbon controller held down and then you actually press the note. So if I press the note first, it has no control. So I need to make sure that I've actually got my finger down on the ribbon controller and then I press the pad. So that kind of works, but I don't actually want it to go that slow. So what I might actually do is I might actually decrease the speed here. And what I can actually do is I can actually start editing these controls whilst I'm actually playing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down the bottom of the ribbon controller, press this. So as you can see there, I was kind of editing the values as I was kind of playing with the ribbon controller. Now, actually having your finger down on that ribbon controller can be a bit of a pain, but of course we actually have the hold on here, the hold feature. So I can actually just activate the hold and then I'll set it at the bottom, for example, let go of it and just press the pad. And as you can hear, that sounds better because as soon as I let my finger off the ribbon controller without the hold on, then the LFO kind of reverts to what it does normally, which doesn't sound great. So actually having the hold activated works really, really well. Okay, so let's take it up a notch and add some effects in over the top. So I'm going to go back to the home screen. I'm going to reset that ribbon controller down and let's go to the effects tab. I think I'm going to choose a dub echo because that usually sounds quite cool. Let's see how that sounds. So that definitely does take it up a notch, but also that echo, that delay just helps stop that sound a little bit nicer because usually when you stop the pad, it stops dead, but having that delay on there just makes it kind of fade over into the next bar or just end nicely, basically. Now, I did mention the LFO can control a whole load of different things, and so far we just got it to control the pitch of that sample, but we can also get it to control all the different things within the effects section. So if I go into the effects of that pad and I add in a filter, for example, now usually we'd use a filter to filter out certain frequencies. By default, it's on the low pass filter, and this is how it sounds. Now, obviously, at the moment, the LFO is still controlling the pitch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and into the LFO and then go to the destination. And this time I'm going to select that cutoff on the filter. So you can see we have all of the different parameters for the filter here. I'm going to set the cutoff. And let's hear how that sounds. That does sound quite cool, but we can also tweak it even further. So I can go into the filter settings here and start playing around with things like the resonance and the actual cutoff itself to kind of to find that kind of first initial frequency that we're then going to modulate. As you can hear, it sounds kind of cool. Let's add some reverb to that, for example. So as you can hear, there's just so many possibilities for using that LFO with different effects that you have on that pad. But up till now, we've only been using that same waveform. So let's try changing that to something different. So I'm going to jump into my browse and let's try something different. Let's try the white noise. As you can hear, it's a completely different effect, but works so well. And it's just a simple white noise. There's something amazing about that waveform. It is just white noise, but with that, a filter going on and the LFO, you can create some really interesting stuff. Let's try another waveform. Let's try one of the square waves, for example. That's definitely quite heavy. Let's try one of the sine waves. Now the sine wave doesn't really have that much upper frequency, so let's try, rather than using a filter, I'm going to disable that for now. And let's set the LFO to the pitch again. That does sound really cool. Now let's jump into the LFO and have a look at some of these other settings. For example, the shape of the wave. This can really change how this sounds. Let's go through a few of these different ones and see how they sound. There you go. Perfect if you're trying to create some effects for an old 70s sci-fi show. It really is amazing the kind of stuff you can do with that LFO settings. It's just so much fun to play around with that LFO. There's almost limitless possibilities as to what you can do with it, especially with how many different things you can map it to and all the effects that you can kind of layer over the top. And the results are amazing. You can create some really huge effects, big downshifters, risers, transition effects. There's so much stuff you can do with it, and actually using the ribbon controller really makes it feel like you're playing a synth or a live instrument of some sort, not just a sampler. And it really works and makes this unit come alive. I really love kind of playing around with it. And with this example, I've just been using really basic waveforms, just simple ones that you find in any old synth. And if you want to download those, you can do. Again, I'll put it in the description below if you want to download those, but feel free to use your own samples, chords, pads. They all work really well with the LFO and allow you to create some really complex, ever-evolving kind of synth lines. Now, I did mention at the start of this video, the whole point of me looking into this LFO feature was the fact that I wanted to perform one of my remixes, my remix of DJ Dub's I Feel Chemistry live, and I thought I'd kind of show you how I've got that set up and how this kind of works on that. So there you go, the LFO feature on the DJS-1000. It's just so much fun to play around with. I definitely recommend you just give it a go because it is just so cool to play around with. If you like this video and it's been useful to you, then definitely subscribe to my channel. I've got a load more DJS-1000 content on there. Definitely take a look through that. Subscribe, hit that notification bell as well so you're notified the moment I upload a brand new video, and hopefully I'll see you again in the next one.